Well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I had this feeling that something ain't right. I'm so scared in case I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Well, I'm stuck in the middle with you, and I'm wondering what it is I should do.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Barely Noticed podcast, a podcast focusing on the history and development of queer culture, and in particular, the development of the bear subculture. In this episode, we are joined with Dr. Les K. Wright to discuss a bit about the historical and sociological origins of the bear community, as well as his own contributions to recording and studying bear history. Les is a queer historian, writer, photographer, literary scholar, and book publisher. He has been a scholar activist since the 1970s. He received his MA from the University of Tübingen and his PhD from UC Berkeley. He is a founding member of the GLBT Historical Society San Francisco, founder of the Bear History Project, and founder and president of the Bear History Project International. He is the editor of the Bear Book and the Bear Book 2, author of Resilience, a polemical memoir of AIDS, bears, and fucking, and a collection of his photographs have been published in Salt City and its Environs. His writing has appeared in the Gay and Lesbian Review, The Good Men Project, VoiceMale Drummer, RFD, Bay Area Reporter, Culture Vulture, White Crane Review, and elsewhere. His bi-monthly column Bear Tracks has been appearing in Bear World magazine since 2023. He lives in Syracuse, New York, and participates in the gay spiritual communities in the Billies and at Easton Mountain. Les, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast episode. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I'm just back from a working quote unquote vacation at Berwick Provincetown. It was very productive, very busy. I'm still kind of blown away by, having been given, the honor of being Bear Icon of 2024. So it's official. I am now a cultural icon, and I'm turning to my mentor, Dolly Parton, to learn how I need to behave now.
Nice. Yeah, I remember I remember seeing on social media that you were setting up booths and you were selling some of the bear books and your memoirs and the like. Were you able to sell any books while you were there, or?
Well, I sold one book. I comped a few, and I kept referring everybody to eBay and Amazon to look for cheap used copies, because the price of especially academic books is astronomical today, and I find it inexcusable. So I'd rather people buy and read than not.
Right. And it is always helpful if you're ever able to contact the publisher to see if, hey, do you know if you might have a PDF copy of this, wink, wink, or something along those lines. Sometimes you're able to get past the outrageous prices, but yeah, other times you kind of just have to rely on what you can from the university institution or the like. But yeah, anyway, okay, great. So I figured before we maybe discuss the bear community, maybe as a whole and some of its historical developments, I figured we could start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought about your own interest in studying history, specifically bear and queer history? Were you always interested in historical studies?
Well, let's see. Well, here is the Spark Notes version of that, because that's a very, very long answer, of course. Well, I trained as a literary scholar and my major was always officially comparative literature, and I specialized in German and Russian. And when I was a freshman in 1971, that combination was a highly prized skill set, and very, very few people could do it. So it was a guaranteed job offer. Not that I was thinking practically at that point. And by the time I graduated PhD, the Cold War was over, the Berlin Wall had fallen, the Soviet Union collapsed, and they weren't teaching German and Russian anymore. So that job market evaporated. So it's a couple of things. Parallel to my formal academic studies, I started coming out in 72, and in 74 came all the way out. I participated in a study abroad program at the University of Würzburg in Germany, and when I got off the plane, I was out. And I immediately started reading everything I could, following both the American and the West German gay press and doing research on my own. I mean, there was no such thing as gay and lesbian studies or gay and lesbian history at that point. So I was, pursuing that on my own. So, from the start of my coming out, I've been, fascinated about the history of, who we are and where we came from. And in terms of, I continue to do that. Always doing a gay focus in all the research papers that I could justify doing that for. Trying to think. In terms of doing queer history myself, a few years after I had moved to San Francisco in 79, I was invited by Alan Barabee to join his San Francisco Gay and Lesbian History Project, where everybody who was doing queer history, people came specifically to, go to a meeting and share their work. And it was an amazing place to learn. I met, most all of the gay and lesbian historians that are now, on bookshelves and all of that stuff. And I learned through Alan how to do grassroots gay history. He had been working on coming out under fire about gays and lesbians finding each other and building community after they were discharged from the military. And also about that time, AIDS was hitting very strong, and we realized that, if we didn't act now, a lot of gay history would be lost. Biological family would show up in San Francisco and throw out all the gay stuff. So, so we founded the San Francisco gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender historical society. And we had a long debate for several months about whether to put the L or the G first, and decided, this was still in the day of, print phone books, that people would look for gay first. And so that's why it's, quote unquote, politically incorrect to have gay first. Anyway, so that's all kind of, the background and context. And in terms of starting to do bear history, I was introduced to through, a variety of vectors, I guess, to this new phenomenon of beardom, for lack of a word, that was happening in San Francisco. Bear magazine was founded by Richard Baldrick, who kind of broke away from a group that was organizing what they called bear hug play parties. And I can go into the details of this stuff further on. the Lone Star Saloon was founded at this time, and the earliest stage of the internet was also happening. And it was it was small. You had, it was a bit of a learning curve. It appealed mostly to geeks, and a lot of self-identifying bears were geeks. And anyway, so doing all of this stuff, pretty quickly it became apparent to me that there was, more going on than just, well, it's this year's, fashion in the gay community in San Francisco. And I started taking mental notes, and it all grew from there.
And with respect to recording much of the history and sociological trends of the community, when did you start this project of recording and publishing the two works, the Bear Book and the Bear Book 2?
It was I'm trying to think exactly when, in the late 80s, the predecessor to IBR, International Bear Rendezvous, which no longer exists either, there was Bear Expo, and I think that ran for 3 years, and that was then replaced by IBR, and Bear Expo was kind of a call out, because the concept of bears spread very quickly across the U.S., particularly through Bear Magazine, and the Bear Hug Sex Party also had an underground fame rather than infamy, I guess. And again, guys would travel from a lot of places to come to do this bear thing. And it's also significant to note that because of the AIDS epidemics, the bathhouses all got shut down in San Francisco. Private, groups of guys would get together privately, and they would have sex only among the 6 or 12 or however many of them there were. And then here and there, the Bear Hugs, follow this path that you claimed yourself as a private social club. You charged admission, which was $1, and you signed the guest book using whatever name you wanted to use, but this made it legal. And so anyway, so guys started coming, and I've lost, what was the question again? Sorry.
Oh, no worries. I was just asking with respect to how did those two Bear books come about? It was a set of collected articles. And
okay, so yeah, so these things were happening, and I was writing short pieces for the club newsletter, and again, following the explosion, I was, buying all collecting all the bear related publications. I got in contact with as many clubs as I could, and collected ephemera from them, and so on and so forth. So I was, amassing everything that I could, and started conducting interviews, audio interviews, as old audio cassette tapes, interviewing individual people. And that would have been, again, the late 80s, early 90s. And the reason, the reason I mentioned Bear Expo was that I used to hold kind of like a discussion group called What is a Bear at it, and everyone was welcome to come in and join the conversation, discuss, well, what is a bear? And there were many opinions. There were, as many opinions as there were people in attendance, of course. And I guess that really kind of got the ball rolling in terms of, my doing bear history is kind of a serious pursuit. So, and with all of those materials gathered, in 92, I declared my personal archives the Bear History Project. And in 93, when I moved to Boston for my first full-time tenure track teaching job, and that gave me the breathing room to sit down and start following through. And that's when, Bear Book One began. And kind of the other kind of fortuitous thing was that Hayworth Press at the time was looking to do a book on bears, and Hayworth Press, which also is no more, was this incredible kind of the only academic niche publishing house that specialized in LGBT queer material, and they covered absolutely everything. They were phenomenal. Anyways, so they wanted to do bears, and two people had both, independent of each other, put me in touch with Bill Palmer, the editor-in-chief. And, I didn't have to go through the process of compiling a manuscript and submitting it for review. It was like, here's carte blanche, whatever you put together, we're going to publish. And happily, they were very impressed with what they got.
With respect to your research and recording and archiving of bear history, was this something that was continuous from when you started in the 90s? Did you take did you ever have to take a bit of a break from it, and if so, what brought about the change?
Okay, yes, I mean, I took both a professional and then a personal break. And the professional break was in 2005. By that point, number one, bears had mushroomed at such an accelerating speed that it was no longer possible for one person to keep up with all of it. And number two, all of that collecting that I had been doing, all of a sudden, print went away and electronic came in. And in the very early days, no one, not even professional archivists, had yet figured out how to archive that material. And I suppose the current best example is Facebook. That stuff comes and goes so quickly, and it's impossible to archive it. So that was the second thing. And the third thing was that at that point, my bear history work had run me $30,000 into personal debt, and I just couldn't pay for it out of pocket anymore. So with all of that converging, I set it aside, and I reached out to the Human Sexuality Collection at Cornell, and they were very happy to archive it, and they are now the permanent archive for both my personal papers and the original Bear History Project. So that was that. And the personal thing, and this is kind of a whole other topic. When Richard Bulger put Jack Radcliffe on the cover of Bear magazine, Jack Radcliffe all of a sudden was like the bear icon. This vision of hulking, hairy, very muscled, but with a little, not skint, I mean, little flesh, between the muscles and the skin, as it were. All of a sudden, muscle bears were the thing, and lots of guys were suddenly, became muscle bears because it was cool. And there was this whole kind of inversion that all of the things that bears had begun as, having been outsiders, having been marginalized, and all of that stuff, and creating a community that was very welcoming and sought to be non-judgmental. All of a sudden, the muscle bears were exactly the thing that the original bears had walked away from because they had been excluded. And, both my personal experience and certainly talking with other guys, doing my research, in those early muscle bear years, these guys were often very entitled, and would, for example, go to a bear club and expect to be let in free, attend events to be let in free, simply because they were so beautiful. And that kind of arrogance turned a lot of people off. And the good news is that, that is long since passed. There are, of course, still muscle bears, but, we're kind of, we're all more or less social equals, if you will, in the bear community. And muscle bears, kind of know their place, which is that they're one of the gang. They're not anyways.
Gotcha.
So I mean, at that point, I walked away because I was, kind of horrified personally. And then for, over a decade, I had nothing to do with the bear community. And then I got curious, casting about for community again for myself, and really wondering about, well, where are the bears now, began exploring, which has now, blossomed into like a full-time engagement again, and discovered that, the bears had, expanded and transformed into all kinds of wonderful things that are both very much in keeping with the original spirit and values of the earliest bears, and very much a part of, the section gender, multiplication. I'm not sure what the word is, but the increasing multifacetedness, whatever is out there, in queer land is also in bear land today.
I figured maybe we could shift to more discussing what we were talking about earlier about the concrete origins of the bear community sociologically. First off, where exactly does the term bear originate? I've heard different accounts and narratives about this. I've heard that it was the magazine. I heard it was the Advocate. I've heard different accounts, but where do we see the terminology cropping up?
Well, everybody, I mean, that's very political. Everybody wants to claim that they were the first, and I had researched it, and this is one of the things that I had to go through and write up some notes about that. Now, to be clear, when we use the term bear in the current understanding of bears, gay bears, queer bears in gay community and bear culture, we are talking about bears as self-identifying. So the earliest days, the earliest years of San Francisco, that was one of the things that was a commonly held value, that you're a bear if you say you're a bear. Something that came out when I was doing these "What is a Bear" discussions. So, with that specific understanding, it started in San Francisco in the late 80s. Prior to that, well, of course, bear has for many generations been a term of endearment for a bearish man, a straight man. The Bear magazine, as I say, came about at the same time the bears were happening in San Francisco, because Richard was a part of that, and chose the title for, I think, obvious reasons. Prior to that, in 1979, this author, George Mazzei, wrote a kind of a fun piece that the Advocate published called, I think, Who's Who in the Zoo. And he had a variety of animals, and as or gay men as animals, describing what their characteristics and habits were, and one of them was a bear. And again, it's important to understand that his description of a bear was not what we understand bears to be today. So they used the term earlier, but they were describing something different. And prior to that, there were, when was this? In I think 1966, the Satyrs, which was a gay leather motorcycle club in Los Angeles, used the term. So it appears twice in their records, but then it never went anywhere. So that would be actually the first documented use of bear for a gay man. But again, it's not specified what that was. So that's the history of that.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the associated characteristics of larger or hairier or, affectionate or cuddly, those are later tag-ons to the term, but before that, there are earlier examples of using the term bear to describe gay or queer men.
Right. And specifically through secondary sexual attributes, weight, body hair, beards, primarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I can ask a more complicated question, how and why would you say does the bear community emerge sociologically? I know we've talked about San Francisco. We've mentioned the bear hug parties. How exactly does it organically develop?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is crucial, and I did write about it in the original Bear book. And I guess that's one of the chapters that people speed read through. Anyways, yeah, I mean, there was a convergence of several things. One was guys who identified and started calling themselves bears because they tended to be older and heavier set and furry, were very much not the Castro clone or twink ideal of young, slender, smooth skin. And we were often not permitted to go into the bathhouses, sex clubs, often, openly ridiculed in gay bars. And so, that was one big factor, that self-identifying bears all found themselves outsiders in the community, in their own community. So the outsiders came together and created their own community where we were all insiders, if you will. Add to that, there was also the common practice from the leather subculture of a flagging, of using the colored hanky code, and kind of as a protest or as a camp. some guys started stuffing a little teddy bear in their back pocket to say, I like to cuddle, I like to be cuddled. I don't want to be defined by what I specifically do in bed. So that kind of added to it. A third thing also, I think really key for the timing of it was that AIDS had hit and was hitting very hard. And, one of the really common things was wasting syndrome. So gay men lost a lot of weight very quickly. And you would see guys, in my memory, walking on Castro Street, looking like they just walked out of a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. And so being heavier set meant you were healthy. And so, fat equals healthy equals sexually attractive was a big shift in that. I don't think if there's anything else. So those were the main things. And kind of the other sign of, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times, was that independent of each other, things, that I found out, talking to guys in other places, is that, guys in New York and Chicago and Dallas, wherever, were also starting to describe themselves as bears, and nobody knew that anyone else was doing that. So kind of like there was something happening that was a bit bigger than conscious, deliberate planning, and that all kind of came together. And I think the key part about why in San Francisco, where this all kind of takes root and takes off, is that San Francisco is a city of neighborhoods. And they're like distinct villages all over the city with their own characteristics, and the Castro was one of the gay villages, and became the dominant gay village in the late 70s. And so you have a physical neighborhood. It's very organic, the kind of neighborhood that I'm blanking on her name. Anyway, sorry about that. There was an incredible sociologist who wrote about, why cities work, and talks about these organic neighborhoods. Jane Jacobs, yeah, is her name. And I want to say the Fall and Rise of American Cities, something like that. Anyway, so you have this physical neighborhood. Most of the residents are gay. The merchants are all gay. And we have the Castro Theater, the movie theater. Pretty much everything is either gay owned or specifically gay oriented in providing services to the community. And it had a strong feeling of being, a classic ethnic community, ethnic neighborhood, and people knew, we all knew each other either personally or by sight. One of the things that I loved to do was to, kind of just hang out on Castro Street, like on a Saturday morning. There was a covered trash bin that I like to stand next to right in the corner of Castro and 18th, and just spend 2 or 3 hours talking to people, guys, as they went by. So it was very much kind of a small town, small village feeling to it. So anyway, so when the bear stuff started happening, we were all right there. And people you talked to or met at a party, you saw afterwards. And so that kind of organic rise of a community, it was right there. It was not, these days with, the internet and Zoom and all of that, has a sense of of community. I mean, there is connection, but it's not the same as in person. Anyways, yeah.
Right, right. And then one of the hallmarks of the bear community is it's traditionally understood to be a celebration of larger weight, size, presence of body hair, etc. And can any of these be attributed at all? I'm wondering to feminist parallels regarding critiques of body standards or things of that sort that are happening roughly around the same time that the community is developing, or are there other sociological factors at play?
Well, very key from the beginning were, excuse me, the beauty myth and what is now named fat phobia. And these are still very strong. I mean, having just, as I say, having just come back from Bear Week in Provincetown, it's, you know, everyone is a part of how they see themselves. You know, and the beauty myth was, requiring women to live up to impossible standards of beauty. That the same thing, in gay men, in the gay male community, what used to be called body fascism, speaks to both of these aspects, in terms of, what is considered traditionally handsome, and the thing, facial hair has gone in and out of fashion over the centuries, and post World War II America, clean shaven was it. Bearded men with beards were not to be trusted. And so in different ways, it was, bears challenged the idea of what is handsome, which also includes, this, kind of negative reaction to the rise of muscle bears. The kind of repeating the beauty standard. And also, in terms of fat phobia, that skinny, being thin is another traditional mark of, beauty and sexual desire. And eroticizing heavier set bodies has been a gradual process, and it's blossomed, in recent years here in the US. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just touching on those, and I'm not really, I mean, most of the other concerns of classic feminism, and certainly what women are dealing with in this country now, apply to women and not to gay men. Things like, the legal right over your own body, for example. Yeah.
And I'm glad that you mentioned muscle bears and how there was a bit of a tension in the community uh, between them and the rest of the bear culture. Um, because another aspect of that's associated with the bear community is that it tends to be a celebration of like a hyper masculinity and other gendered characteristics. And I'm wondering, where exactly does this arise? Does this have any connection at all with what might have preceded it, the leather community or things of that nature?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, the gay male leather community arose after World War II. I mean, and this is a whole other dramatic story. And I won't go into a lot of the details, but in 60, maybe 64, 65, something like that. I think it was Like Magazine did a cover story on the leather community in San Francisco with a lot of photos, and there was a huge 2-page spread of I think it was the ramrod of, there was a huge painting on the wall, and there were guys in leather standing along the bar. And the magazine announced that San Francisco was the gay capital of the United States. So lots of gay men started flocking there. And it also, I mean, the kind of the radicalness of that moment was that it was like all of a sudden mainstream America was awakened to the fact that not all gay men are, effeminate sissies who wear dresses and carry purses, that there are actually, the gay men could actually be masculine. So this was a big pushback against mainstream stereotypes. And then leather has traditionally been about celebrating masculinity, hypermasculinity. Again, but mostly in terms of, I would say, performing it. I mean, dressing butch and kind of walking butch. I mean, not the kind of traditional things that are now classified as toxic masculinity. And there's kind of a pivotal transitional person in all of that. Jack Fritcher was, he's still alive, and we're actually fairly close friends. Published the first images of what would be identified as bears in Drummer magazine, and used the term bear before there were bears. So I kind of I consider it now kind of, proto bear, because it does precede, the self-defining bears. So there's a kind of a transition there, and or evolution, in two directions, in one in leather and the other into bear. And there, to this day, there's a lot of overlap between bears and leather. And someone just this year designed a flag specifically for leather bears, which is very snazzy. So anyways, bear masculinity, is a blend of physical, traditional, the appearance, the physical sides of masculine men. And bear porn often has lumberjacks and truckers and other blue collar guys. So there's a big, celebration of the blue collar look. But at the same time, bears are known for being nurturing and friendly and warm and heartfelt, and those kinds of traditionally feminine qualities. So there's this kind of intertwining where bear masculinity also embraces our feminine side. And right now, gay bears are queer bears. Well, specifically traditional gay bears are looked upon, are thought about stereotypically in academic circles as cisgender, gay, white, middle class men. And that is like totally out. It's something worth studying these days. But I think once that crowd starts picking up that bears have really expanded through the entire queer spectrum, that there will be, new interest in us. And what got me off on that tangent is that specifically the only place where I've been seeing serious attention being played by sociologists is in this what I think it's sociologists, anthropologists call hybrid masculinity, which starts with typically straight white middle class men either becoming metrosexuals or taking on habits and dress of I don't know what to call them. Those considered socially inferior, like, taking on urban Black cultural symbols and absorbing that into their white middle class identity or performance of straight masculinity. So
Right, right. And because I know that in one of the papers in one of the Bear books, it discusses this issue that one of the authors theorizes that there's sort of an appropriation of lower class aesthetics, and it's being taken on by middle class, and it's being fetishized, it's being romanticized, and it's being something to appropriate. Um, Maybe it's a bit reductive to say that's the only sort of feature that's going on, because I mean, working class, lower class bears do make up the community. It wouldn't just be considered middle class. But would you say that that phenomenon or that critique is at all fair, or do you think that that's true to your experience?
well, I would say number one, that is now kind of it's a stage in history that we moved beyond, because queers who identify as bears are all sorts of things beyond all of that. But again, beginning, I mean, I was very struck as you talk. I think you're talking about Eric Rofus's essay. And I knew Eric pretty well. Yeah, he was very middle class, and I'm working class in background. But through my education, I've acquired the cultural capital of being perceived of as middle or upper middle class. People don't know me. I mean, I was kind of struck that never occurred to me. Most of the guys I knew in the bear community were also, working class. And I hadn't really thought much about class issues in those terms, about fetishizing. But yeah, that does make sense, because traditionally working class men have been fetishized as, they're real men, and again, they don't get their muscles from the gym, they get the muscles from chopping trees and shoveling dirt or whatever.
Right. And if I may also ask, I know that you mentioned how bears at the beginning of its development were often excluded from bars or saunas or things of that sort. Um, when, in your experience and research, did bear culture start to become more mainstream, or maybe even like coveted, so to speak? When do we see it developing into more of a mainstream identity?
Um, Excuse me. I think surprisingly quickly, I would say after the first, 5 to 10 years. So in the 90s, mid 90s and onward, became more and more mainstream. You know, Gay bears, started out by identifying kind of bear icons from TV and movies. People like Richard Carnes, who was on the sitcom Home Improvement, Hoss Cartwright from Bonanza, and other people, like other guys like that. And then here and there, and I really wish I had taken note of these looking back, there would be little, moments of recognition. I'm trying to think, Seth MacFarlane has often been kind of very perceptive in picking up on something before anyone knows about it. I remember in one cartoon of one of the characters commenting about Bruce Jenner was really a woman long before he ever came out as trans. And there was another, and the first one in the cartoons was I don't know. Anyways, there was a little bit where the two bears at the kitchen, the one bear is sitting at the table and the other bear is cooking for him. And the one cooking, and they're both men, and the one cooking says, starts talking about, oh, there's this new bear in town, and how is it you know him so well? And they get there's kind of a little slide, into gay manners there, and other little things like that. So it started coming through. And yeah, it's also kind of curious because it's like almost invisible. I can't point to other specific markers, but bears went from being invisible and then kind of being laughed at in the gay community to we did go away, and more guys started identifying, and then there was a gradual dropping of prejudice against us, and now we are very mainstream within the queer community.
Right.
Yeah.
And well, maybe on the subject of dropping prejudice, this might be a good segue into a few other topics I was hoping we could discuss. Because while the bear community is often touted as being accepting with regards to weight and size, has there ever been any historical tension in this respect? I think you mentioned it a bit earlier with sort of the clash with muscle bears sort of seeing
Yeah.
themselves as superior or things of that sort.
Well, there have been several. And again, as I say, for me, the touchstone is to go back to the understanding that bears are self-identifying. And there was a long stretch, and I think it's still out there, though to a much lesser degree, and I got this a lot when I first started, being interviewed by the gay press, that, well, bears are hairy, bearded men. And well, yes, you can photograph that. It's a little bit more difficult to photograph being, heart-centered or tender or whatever like that. So yeah, and there was a tension between are you hairy or are you hairless? And I know some bears have really struggled with the idea that, well, I don't have any body hair, so I can't be a bear. And others who were very forthright in proclaiming that they are. And again, early on, there was this bear code that a couple of guys developed for use on the internet before there were pictures. So there are a variety of letters with pluses and minuses and numbers that came from a system for cataloging stars. And they would describe a variety of characteristics. And one of them was being a bear, BEHR, which meant you had no body hair. So that was one issue. The race issue, I mean, racism and misogyny have existed all along in the gay men's community, and there certainly has been that among the bears. More so, in the 80s and 90s than now, I would say. And there was, again, a recognition from the beginning. There were always black bears, and there were always panda bears, who were Asian men. And I had an interesting interviewed a guy fairly recently who told me his story of coming into bears. That he's originally from the Philippines, and he is both Asian and very hairy, which is unusual. And he said that he found a lot of rejection. I mean, being a bear doesn't mean that you're automatically attracted to other bears. Everyone has their own taste, of course. But he said most of the bears he met who were attracted to Asian men were attracted precisely because they were hairless. And he went through a lot to, for himself to work past, that as kind of a given. So yes, so there is that about race. I mean, it's not just black and white. It's very complex, and it's something that I think deserves more deeper study rather than just anecdotal stuff, which I'm collecting and observing at this point.
Right. I am hoping maybe in the future, if I can get Ali Lopez on, maybe to discuss that.
Oh, he's a wonderful person to talk to about that. Yes.
Okay.
He's an incredibly amazing person.
Okay.
I love him very dearly. Yeah.
And then another interesting observation that you made in some of your works, I know that you make it in your memoir, is with respect to the connection between the community, the gay community, the bear community, et cetera. It's aesthetics and capitalism. I very much enjoyed your reflection in your memoir regarding how, on account of the predominance of capitalism in our lives, it exerts its influence upon what are at first countercultural movements or subcultures alike. And after a certain point, once it becomes more mainstream, it starts to commodify its identity and sublates into the rest of the system, rather than having the community juxtaposed against it. And would you say that is true, or that's something that you've seen develop gradually, or?
Wow. That's a whole other huge topic in gay history. Again, let me do kind of a Sparks Notes presentation of my perspective of that. There has long, in the United States, there's long, change, the movement toward fighting for the acceptance of homosexuals, to put it that way, started out as a left radical impulse. Harry Hay was one of the earliest people. He had been a communist. He argued for a cultural third sex, not a biological third sex, but a cultural third sex, that gay men were different in a cultural understanding, and that we exist to help mankind in ways that straight people can't, because of the way they the way men objectify women, and gay men to his understanding, did not do that or do that in that way. And there was a very strong spiritual component, which is what took me into researching deeper into his life and his work. Anyway, so you have this, very left-wing individual, an iconoclast, who the Mattachine Society in Los Angeles started out using the cell structure of quote unquote communist infiltrators, where nobody knew anybody's identity, so that if you were caught, you had no names to give to the authorities and all of that. Anyway, so as that started growing, there was a takeover. Other members, were against this kind of radical change and wanted gay people to be seen as just like straight people. And Frank Kameny in DC was very much that advocate, and that when he led protests in front of the White House, every men and women had to dress up in business attire to show that we look like, because we are just like straight people. So there's long been this tension, and gay liberation was, even more deeply the belief that gay and lesbian people, by liberating us from the oppressive structures and values of society, we would liberate everyone else. And we'd all live in peace and harmony in hippiedom forever and ever. I mean, I seriously believe that, and to a great deal of extent still do. But that made us visible, publicly widespread. And fairly quickly that was replaced as we started inching toward more acceptance. This kind of mainstreaming of gay people took over completely. And ever since that, it's all been about, definitely, equal rights, equal housing opportunity, and ironically, same-sex marriage, when the gay lib people said that, heterosexual marriage is a bad idea, and is one of the things that causes so many problems in society, and we need to, gay people create whatever relationships work for us individually. Anyways, so on and on about that. Yeah.
Right. It does seem that it is interesting about that observation about opposition with respect to gay marriage. It came about because there was a desire to sort of develop organically our own sort of relationships or social structures. Because I have seen maybe kind of an imitation of this with respect to all the names and denominations and extrinsic markers that you find in the community of people identifying as of a polyamorous or an open marriage or things of that sort. And those terms can mean all sorts of different things to different people. And
Right,
it just
right.
seems very difficult to pinpoint, to use these terms that I just don't think that they work. It's too fluid to sort of capture all these in these labels, because they just mean so many different things to different people.
Well, and it's kind of on the one hand, these are, manifestations, people living out that kind of gay liberationist ideal that people create relationships and families that serve their needs best, also interwoven with this need we've got to give everything a name. It's kind of taxonomy of, which square do you fit in. So you've got to have a name for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I know that obviously it is something of a cliche to talk about the presence of pride as merchandise or pride as something sold to you instead of its more activist uh, grassroots, which I've heard as sort of like I oscillate on this particular problem of like corporate pride, so to speak, because I know that while its presence might be something that's inauthentic, uh, it still seems like they're expanding the presence of uh, queer culture in some way. Maybe that's too idealistic. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think the sword cuts both ways, and you know, and for me personally, I find it problematic. But you know, having come out of grassroots gay activism, we did for ourselves what we needed to do. And, you know, gay pride marches were a political statement of showing up and saying, we are here and we're not going away. And that kind of, you know, with the, you know, more or less complete mainstreaming that, well, you know, corporations make a lot of money by selling to us. We live, I try to think exactly how to phrase it. I mean, we live in a society now where, and you really get this with all the political news about, you know, narratives. You know, it's not what you are and do, it's what the narrative is of what you are and do. I mean, there's this kind of step back from reality that your performance is what counts. And there is that kind of, you know, performativity where, you know, corporations perform acceptance by advertising our presence. And that's the double-edged sword where they both, you know, promote us as existing, but because they stand to make money by it. And you know, and we see the truth of that whenever there is a you know, you know, a consumer protest, like what was it, Bud Light, you know, all the right wing decided that was gay, so they stopped buying it. So Bud Light, you know, I forget what they did, but usually they stop it to increase their profits again. So that's, you know, I find that problematic. And on the third side, you know, because this is something that I'm wrestling with right now, you know, things like, you know, Provincetown Bear Week is a very big event in the annual calendar, both in the US and, you know, worldwide in terms of the big events. And it is wonderful. It's exuberant. It's very celebratory. There's every imaginable kind of self-defining bear there. You know, true to what people say we are these days. But you do have to be middle class to go to it, you know. If you're doing everything, it's like $10,000 for a week. I mean, I don't have that. I've never had that kind of money, you know. I mean, I used to do Bear Week in P-Town all the time because I lived in Boston. So it was like, it's right there, you know, it's kind of the, you know, I don't know, a suburb of gay Boston, if you will. And I'm fine, and I'm wrestling with that. You know, I do find it problematic because I am one of those people, and I identify with all of the bears who would love, you know, many would love to go, but they can't afford it. And some just, you know, out and out resent the fact that, you know, being a bear means you have to have money. And since I don't have money, I guess I'm not a bear. and a lot of resentment. But on the other hand, these events can't happen otherwise. Woodstock doesn't happen every year where everybody, there's going to be a week-long concert out in some guy's field. Everybody show up. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And I also wonder if another weakness of the bear community, or also the wider queer community at large, I wonder if it can devolve into a kind of superficial mimesis with respect to our social interactions, because I think that what binds us together, or what should bind us together as a community, is our commonality and our shared experiences as being gay, queer, trans, etc. But I think at times, because I think that a lot of our desires are understood to be mimetic, as imitating what others do and want, and it plays an important factor in shaping our community as well. And I think that one of the problems with that is it can lead to no small degree of I don't want to say superficiality, but that's kind of my concern. I know that with Rene Girard, full disclosure, listeners, is a bit of a hero of mine. So if you hear me talking about him from time to time, that's why. And he theorized that much of our desire is mimetic or imitative. We see desires that other people have, and we strive to imitate them. And I think at times that can sometimes play out within our own community, where you don't necessarily want to befriend someone or socialize in the community for authentic reasons. You just want to, you're pursuing someone because other people are pursuing them, or something along those lines. And I've spoken to title holders in the past a few times, and they've kind of described their own experiences where, before they had received the sash or the stipulation, they were active in the community, but they weren't anything in particularly special. But as soon as they got that recognition, suddenly everyone wanted to be their best friends. Suddenly everyone wanted to pursue them sexually. And it would even get to the point where they wouldn't even look at their face. They just look at their sash to see where they were from when they were first meeting them. So I wonder if that's another issue that the community might face.
Well, I mean, the thing that just struck me funny about this last thing about reading the sash, it reminds me of people who go to art museums, and rather than, studying the painting, they'll go up and see, well, who painted it? So I'll know if it's a painting worth looking at or not.
Right.
Well, I mean, I've read Girard, not in a long time, and not in depth to know really where his ideas have come from for him. And this is very interesting. I would love to see what you might write about that. Kind of, again, my take comes from capitalism, where with the rise of the modern Western world, arose out of European feudalism, where everyone's social position was fixed at birth, and there was no way to change it for almost everybody. So if you were, I don't know, digging potatoes on your landowner's land, that's what you did. That's what your family had done, and what they always would do. But with the emergence of capitalism, people would get paid for what they were doing, and if they got paid more than they needed to survive, they could save it. And so this begins to open the door to moving socially out of one's class. Again, this is a very simplified Sparks Notes version of it, and very significant, from my perspective, is that with this ability to better oneself, economically, which then transferred into, social and cultural extensions, social envy developed, because now you're looking at your neighbor, and this is kind of talking in similar circles as Gerard, where you could see, well, they got that, why can't I have that? And I'm envious that they have it because I don't have it. And so that kind of envy and resentment starts happening. And and as that has evolved over the centuries in capitalism, we've reached a point in consumer capitalism where buying stuff magically transforms you. There's both the dream that advertising sells you, and some banal commercial on TV I just saw this morning about, I don't know, if you buy this drug, suddenly you're well, they're all the same. Your life is going to be improved by buying this thing. So we buy status symbols. Why do you drive a Ford as opposed to driving a Lexus? Because that says a lot. That projects a lot to other people about your social status. And also I mean, we also have the cult of personality in our culture, where people can be famous merely because they're famous, and that's what they're famous for. It's kind of the reductio ad absurdum of that concept. And so, yeah, being close to celebrity, some of that celebrity rubs off on you. Similarly, that if you're friendly with rich people, somehow magically some of that wealth is going to be showered down on you. So, anyways, so yeah, not
Sure.
quite sure.
No, that was
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Les. This has been a great interview. I just have two closing questions. With respect to what developments are we seeing with regards to the recording of Bear history? Are we seeing an increased interest in the sociological developments and trends in the culture, or what can you say to that?
For the most part, no. Certainly not in North America and Europe. Because I'm basically it, much to my chagrin. I can't believe other people are not doing serious work. I do have a language barrier, but I anecdotally have been told numerous times that there's a lot of serious academic research and theorizing that's been going on in Latin America, which I'm still anxious to connect. I mean, I've connected with a few folks who are in the kind of bear entertainment industry down there, but I don't even through them, I don't have a real sense of the depths of bear community.
That's
Yeah.
That's interesting about research in Latin America, because that was something that I'd also wanted to ask you earlier on, that we talk about the bear community developing in San Francisco and in the rest of North America, but I would assume but there are also parallels of that community developing in other places and countries, like in Europe, for instance. I know that my time in Europe, I've definitely seen the development of a kind of bear culture there.
Uh, uh, Well, again, the thing that because I don't know what's going on in Latin America, in every single case that I've looked at or become aware of, it has always been either an American going to that country and introducing the idea of bears, or someone from that country coming to the US and encountering bears and bringing it back. And this is, currently happening in places like Taiwan and Thailand, where I've recently made some connections. And yeah, they are, I think they're Americans. I'm trying to think if there are any Europeans, but they're Americans who are, and kind of, I don't know what to say exactly, grandfathering or I don't know, guiding or supporting, because there is kind of, the idea is there, and the quote unquote local people, the native Thai people, gay men are embracing it, but with this kind of somebody from the bear homeland, helping them do it. Midwifing, that's the word I wanted. And everywhere I've looked, that has been the case. Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe as a closing question, would you have any source recommendations for those who'd want to learn more about the bear community and its development?
Sure, and I can email you some of this. Again, there's not a whole lot. There has been about history and about actual bears. I mean, the starting points would be my Bear Book and Bear Book 2. That's mostly it. There's another collection of interviews by Ron Suresha called Bears on Bears, which is in its second edition. But it's early bears. It's dated to the 1990s. And there was a sociological study that may have been the guy's dissertation, I don't know. A guy named Peter, I want to say Peter Hennon, and it's called Leathermen, Fairies, and Bears. Right, and he goes anthropological. He has spent time in all three of those cultures, and makes observations about all of them as non-hegemonic masculinities, if you will. And that's pretty much it. What I would point to also would be following Bear World magazine, which is kind of mostly entertainment stuff, but it is current, it is worldwide, and my Bear Tracks columns appears in it twice a month, which is kind of the kind of bear history in brief. And I'm hoping, I haven't decided, we'll see how this evolves, but I've been thinking possibly of publishing that as a standalone title, which would be kind of a quick, read in, all matters bear, or incorporating pieces of it into Bear Book 3, or maybe doing both. So, but that's not out there yet. You need to go through the Bear History Magazine archives to see back columns. And the one other place I would point to is the Bear History Project. We have a website which is bearhistory.org, and it's probably the best starting point if you want to explore deeper.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
Well, uh, thank you so much for coming on, Les. This is a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I try to entertain while I'm educating too, so hopefully it's not too dry.